It's time for Around the Ozarks Sports Scene, brought to you by Fast Break Sports, the largest selection of cards and card supplies in Southwest Missouri. Now here's your host, Scott Puryear.
Welcome in to another edition of Around the Ozarks Sports Scene. I am Scott Puryear. As always, appreciate you giving me your time this week to talk a little sports, and very special show for me today. He was a guest of ours when Ned and I did the show for years over on another station, but I always look forward to talking with Phil Steele and college football. He is the author of the Phil Steele College Football Preview magazine, which, if you haven't got it, it is the preview Bible of college football. More than 350 pages. This is the 30th edition of the magazine out this summer. It is out now. Picked up my copy at Barnes & Noble here in Springfield. Barnes & Noble anywhere, and then Books A Million. I know we've got one of those in Branson and in Joplin, so if you're listening and want to pick it up, highly encourage you to do so, or go to philsteele.com to pick up your copy. And Phil, as always, appreciate you giving me the time to talk a little college football with you.
Hey, a real pleasure, Scott, and I appreciate you and Ned having me on in the early years of the magazine, and we've been doing this probably for a long time together, doing a show every single year, so appreciate you having me on in the early years.
Absolutely, and Ned does a spiel on these stations, but it's at like 6:15 in the morning, so I didn't figure you wanted to jump on there with him at that early without a big pot of coffee maybe, but things have changed so much in the college football world just in the last 2 or 3 years, and wanted to ask you before we kind of got into some detailed stuff on some of the teams around here, how has it changed your preparation for the magazine with the transfer portal, things of that nature? Kids transferring up to the last minute. How do you approach that with your magazine now?
Yeah, we have to go to the press later now than we used to. We used to be able to go to the press, let's say, in the middle of May. When spring practice was over, you knew everybody's roster, and everybody's all set for the season. Now the transfer portal was open all the way until April 30th this year. So what happened is we went to the press June 7th. We not only knew all the players that entered the portal, but by giving it the full month of May and then another week in June, we were able to capture and pretty much everybody that was worth signing this year that's going to be on the field and playing, we were able to capture in the magazine. And it might be a handful of players that signed afterwards, but I was getting texts from coaches 3 days before the magazine went to the press. Hey, we just got this guy. Hey, we just got this guy. So the one major change is it forced us to go to the press later than usual, and but we did capture everybody, and we got everybody on the right team in the magazine.
And, we live in an age now where print is harder to move, and so I know you've got a digital version that people can get at philsteele.com, and I've noticed that you're using Barnes & Noble and Books A Million exclusively. Is that kind of a sign of the times now, and are you selling more of the digital version now than you did in the past?
We're selling more digital, but I'll tell you what, we actually, hard copy is our main seller by far. And, Barnes & Noble, they're doing wonders with the magazine. We went exclusively with them in 2020. They basically stepped up. I was just going to do it online or, print maybe 10,000 magazines and sell them through the office because I didn't know if we were going to play football. Barnes & Noble stepped in and said, we'll buy the magazines from you. They took the risk that year, and I really appreciated it. So that's why we went exclusive with Barnes & Noble. They do allow us to go with Books A Million as well, which are in some areas that they're not in. And so we appreciate both of those fine companies for carrying the magazine. But by centralizing it a little bit, it made it easier for us, and I just appreciate everything that Barnes & Noble did for me.
Well, and you turn through the pages here, and it's a lot. I mean, if you're a college football fan, you'll find stuff. I always get a kick out of the rankings of the stadium's capacity, and where they are, because there's some stadiums I thought were larger that aren't, and where they rank in their conferences. But I think the thing that's really telling is that you are the most accurate college football preview magazine now in the last 29 years, and that's something you take a lot of pride in and tabulating that each year too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's my main goal each and every year, and it's not me saying that. It's there's an independent website that actually existed 5 years before my magazine came out, and I didn't even know it was out there till about 3 years after my magazine came out. Stassen, preseason.stassen.com, and what they do, it's very simple. There's no no judgment in there at all. If you pick a team 7th and they finish 2nd, that's a 5 difference. You're awarded 5 points. And much like golf, low score wins. And we have been the most accurate over the last 29 years. And it's very simple. Pick your conferences, pick your divisions, and whoever has the fewest amount of points wins. But it's something I do take great pride in. In fact, it's probably the most important thing every year. I want to be number one in that accuracy.
Debut of the 12-team playoff this year. Are you excited about that change in college football? One of the positive ones?
You know, Scott, I've always been a 4-team guy, but after last year, what the heck? Let's go with 12 because, let's face it, Georgia and Florida State both made their cases that they should have been in there. I think if you go back and take a look at the entire playoff format, you have years where you couldn't make a case where, hey, this team should be in the playoff, past number 3. And this past year, we actually got to 6 teams. I think Georgia, if they had made the playoff, had a good chance of possibly even winning it. So it definitely, I think if there's ever a year for the 12-team playoff to come into existence, this is it.
Let's start some of the teams. We live in an area here in southwest Missouri where we've got pockets of fans from several schools. You've got a large Mizzou contingent, Arkansas just across the line, Oklahoma here in Springfield with Missouri State, and, of course, they're moved to Conference USA next year. But let's start with the Missouri Tigers. A lot of excitement around Drinkowitz's team in Columbia, 11-2 last year. They had an easy SEC schedule last year. They'll admit it. Some of their fans will even admit that too. This year, the schedule's not much tougher, and then their non-conference is a little bit embarrassing. But does it all set up for Mizzou to maybe be one of those playoff teams when it's all said and done? Because they almost can't avoid winning 11 or 12 games. Yeah,
I mean, it's really laid out for them. In fact, in the spring, I did a analysis of each conference's schedule, strengths, top to bottom, and they're at number 16 out of 16 teams in the SEC is Missouri. They do play Alabama and Oklahoma, but they avoid Texas, they avoid Georgia, they avoid Ole Miss, they avoid LSU. So it's really a great schedule laid out for them. As you mentioned, the non-conference slate, Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, and Vanderbilt, they'll be a double-digit favorite in every single one of those games. This is a Missouri team that in February, I do a preseason top 10, predicting the AP top 10 6 months in advance. And I've got Missouri in there at number 10 in the AP poll. So I think they enter the season number 10, and probably with that schedule, probably stay in there the whole season. They have a great shot of making a playoff this year.
And they got the best receiver in the country, probably in your eyes as well, Luther Burden, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And Luther Burden's a guy that made huge strides last year. And I think moving him to the slot was really the thing to do. It's their second year now in the system. They're more comfortable. Mookie Cooper, Theo Weiss. I rate them the number 2 receiving core in the entire country, and they are indeed led by Luther Burden.
Your thoughts on Brady Cook, the quarterback? He was much maligned early on in his career up there. Seemed last year people really like him when they're winning games. Which Brady Cook do you think we see this fall?
I think we see the one as the season emerged. You remember at the start of the season last year, first game, who's going to be the starter? We're going to give Brady Cook some time. We're going to give Sam Horn some time and see who wins the job. Cook had to win the job in week 1 and did, and then I thought got better as the season went on. And he's a guy that really cares. His care factor is through the roof, and he's a guy that developed as the season went on. And with that receiving core that he's thrown to, and with the veteran offensive line he's got worked in front of him, I think he has a big year.
And I think the jury's still out on which Eli Drinkowitz is the real Drinkowitz. Last year to start the year, just like you said, Cook was kind of a question mark going into last year. Eli Drinkowitz, there were people who had him on the hot seat. He was at 500 or a little below going into the year. Then they go out and they win 11 games to beat Ohio State in the bowl game. And granted, it was an Ohio State that didn't have Marvin Harrison Jr., didn't have their starting quarterback. But which Eli Drinkowitz do you think we're dealing with now going forward?
Well, you see a lot of times coaches hit their stride in year 3. It just took Drink till year 4 to finally hit his stride. As you mentioned, he was 2 games below 500 after 3 seasons. Missouri stuck with him, and I think he rewarded him at 11-2. I like the way he's bringing in. A lot of times they say it's not the schemes, it's not the coach, it's the Jimmies and the Joes. And with Missouri, he's bringing in some big-time recruits. So I like the way he's recruiting. I think that's helped him get better and better. It took him a little bit longer in the rebuild process than you would have thought, but I think it's more towards the latter version.
Well, and they've opened up the checkbook in NIL too. It appears much like your A&Ms and your Miamis and Tennessee and people like that. Your thoughts on NIL and what's going on with high school kids? Do you have an opinion on it?
Well, I'm old school, so I'm not wild about it. But in the same token, it is what it is. And that's pretty much when I talk to the coaches. I talk to over 120 of the 134 head coaches, and we generally spend about an average of an hour with each one of them. And going over the team, a lot of them will say, hey, I'm not wild about the NIL, but you know what? That's what it is, and we got to come up with a plan to do it correctly. So not wild about it like most of the coaches, but you have to deal with it.
Just shift a little bit south to Arkansas and another SEC team and Sam Pittman back for another year. Was that a surprise to you? Did you think that was one of those that was kind of in the balance after what the Hogs did last year or didn't do?
I didn't like the way they finished off last season with the blowout losses to Auburn and Missouri, but Sam Pittman, in his first 3 years, pulled so many upsets. I mean, that first season, 2020, they were favored in exactly 0 games all year. You went 3-7, pulled a bunch of upsets in 21, pulled a bunch of upsets in 22, and then last year it just hurt. I thought losing a guy like Rocket Sanders early in the season or having him be quite ineffective, having their quarterback, KJ Jefferson, get banged up, the myriad of injuries they suffered on both sides of the football. It was a banged-up team that sort of limped in down the stretch. I would think that this year it's more of the Arkansas team that you saw in 2021 and 2022. And keep in mind, last year, they played the toughest 4-game schedule of anybody in the country. They were 4 games away from home against LSU, A&M, Ole Miss, and Alabama. And 3 of those games, they took to the wire. They had a couple of 3-point losses and a 7-point loss. They could easily have had a better record. I think that grilling schedule, those grilling 4 weeks, really took a lot out of them, and we saw it at the end of the season when they were all banged up. So I think we're going to see a better Arkansas team this year, and I'm glad that Arkansas stuck with Sam Pittman.
And I have a son down there going to school, went to 2 or 3 games, saw that Auburn game, which was not good. But you look at their Mississippi State game, was a 7-3 final, I think, and that kind of summarized a lot of their troubles, that they've addressed the offense in the offseason. They go get Talon Green from Boise State. They bring in Bobby Petrino to run the offense. Your thoughts on those two in particular and what they bring to maybe boost that offense for the Hogs?
Yeah, I think Petrino steps into a great situation because Arkansas's offense last year was below average, only 327 yards per game last year. They can only get better. I like Talon Green coming in from Boise. He had a battle for the starting quarterback job, but he's got, when you look at this guy, he looks like a big-time QB. I mean, he's 6'6", 223. He can run. He's got the arm strength. He definitely has the potential. And then I like Jaquindon Jackson coming in from Utah. He has me excited. He was one of the top quarterbacks coming out of high school and started out a quarterback at Utah. His first year running the football there, running back, he moved there in 22, averaged over 6 yards a carry. Last year, had nearly 1,000 yards rushing. I think he's going to be a big-time running back. And last year, running back was a problem. I mean, their top running back only had 312 yards because Rocket was injured and the unit was banged up. My biggest question mark with Arkansas is the offensive line. But when I talked to Coach Pittman, he said they're much improved this year, that Mateos has captured the group, and they're a tight-knit group. They're going to be solid. And if the offensive line is solid, I think the receivers are much improved. The running back room is deeper, more competitive, and will be healthier, and the quarterback will be improved because of that. So overall, I think it will be a much more potent offense.
Schedule's a little better this year. At least they've got some of those big-time teams at home. They're going to have to defend the home turf to to really turn the season around, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. You look at the games like Tennessee at home, Ole Miss at home, LSU at home. Now, these are games, I mean, last year they went into LSU. LSU had a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. They lost by 3. Now they get them at home. So there is that opportunity for them to beat LSU. You look at Ole Miss, a game they lost by 7 on the road. Now they get them at home. So if they can handle those games at home, take advantage of that home field, yes, I think Arkansas has an excellent chance of getting back to a bowl game this year.
They probably should have scheduled another dog or two, too. I mean, going to Oklahoma State in September is not an automatic win. It's going to be tough over there for them. But are they a borderline bowl team? Can they get to 6-6?
I believe they can. Looking at their schedule coming into the year, I've got them a favorite in 5 games, so they need to pull one upset. And as mentioned, the one thing Sam Pittman's done is pull a lot of upsets at Arkansas. So pull one upset, I think they get to a bowl. Pull a couple upsets, and all of a sudden you're starting to look like 2021 or 2022.
Locally here, big news with Missouri State making the jump from FCS to FBS starting next year, not this fall, but the following fall, and a jump to Conference USA. What are your thoughts on that move for the Bears?
Well, they're going to be in my magazine next year, so I better start prepping for them. And I look, every year, every time that the team is joining, I get to talk to the head coach Puryear, so I will talk to Coach Beard in the upcoming weeks and go over the squad with them. I like the fact that they get Clark back at quarterback, because early in the season with Jacob Clark there, they put up 59 points against Utah Tech, and they were looking great. Then he was out for the year after 4 games. Now, they play a brutal schedule this year, but it's a veteran team. They've got 9 starters back on offense, including the entire O-line. The defense has got 10 starters back, including the top 5 tacklers. My big question mark, Scott, coming in, is will they take the same course of action that a team like Sam Houston did or Jacksonville State did coming in, which was redshirt a bunch of players prior to coming in to save them for that start of the FBS. I'll know more about that when I talk to Coach Beard, but if you're a FCS fan, one thing I want to throw out there, Scott, we actually have a FCS digital magazine which has 2 full pages on every FCS team, the same amount of information that you get in the FBS magazine on the FCS teams. That's available at philsteele.com.
Wow, that's awesome. And they're going from what really is the SEC of the FCS level, the Missouri Valley, to CUSA. Will it be that big of a jump for them in terms of quality competition? Because kind of give me your analysis of CUSA, because you've got Liberty and you kind of got everybody else, don't you?
Yeah, and I think CUSA is a winnable conference to step into, and I agree with your analogy. I mean, you're looking at Missouri State this year is taking on 3 teams that were last year's FCS semifinalists. 3 of the 4 teams are taking on Missouri State this year. You look at the CUSA, they got Kennesaw State, which was 3-6 in FCS action last year. Middle Tennessee, brand new head coach. UTEP, brand new head coach. New Mexico State, brand new head coach. And you might have some other brand new head coaches. And I think the CUSA is the weakest of the FBS conferences. So if they're going to join a conference and be competitive early on, that's definitely the one to join.
Probably eases that transition, because it's a lot of schools that have done what they're doing, just did it in the last few years, right? So you're kind of catching them that are still maybe trying to gain their footing in that FBS level.
Yeah, Kennesaw State, Jacksonville State, 2 teams that just stepped up from the FCS level. And just joined my magazine recently, talking to Coach Rich Rod and Brian Bohannon, the 2 head coaches. Both had talked to them the year before they came in, and then now it's the first year for Kennesaw State, and I believe it's the 3rd year for Jacksonville State, or second year. So, yeah, two new teams coming in.
I'm not going to let this go without talking about my Sooners. That was something we did every time. I know you. I had bones to pick with you every now and then, but and then we'll talk some national stuff here in a minute. But with OU, is there a possibility, because of all the hype that Texas is getting going in the SEC, that OU might be flying under the radar a little bit with Brent Venables and this team this year?
Yeah, I do believe so. Now, Scott, in my magazine, I've got two sets of rankings.
Yeah.
I've got the Power Poll rankings, which is where I think the team's talent is, and then I've got them where I project them to do against this year's schedule. We talked about Missouri's schedule being the weakest in the SEC. Who plays the toughest schedule in the SEC this year, Scott?
I believe it's the Sooners, probably.
Yeah, it is Oklahoma. They pretty much pull all the big boys, whereas Missouri avoids the majority of them. Oklahoma plays Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss, LSU, and Missouri. You're talking about 4 or 5 potentially top 10 teams. They also have to play Tennessee. They only have 3 SEC home games. The Texas game is at a neutral site, so 3 SEC home games, and they pull all the big boys. That is a monster schedule for Oklahoma. So they actually rank number 7 in my power poll. I think they're the 7th most talented team in the country. In my rankings, I have number 20, and it's due to the schedule, which is absolutely brutal. But does that mean they're going to have a bad year? No. It just means they're going to have to win some big games, like Missouri on the road. They play Ole Miss on the road. They play LSU on the road. Alabama at home. Texas at a neutral site. Tennessee at home. Auburn on the road. Those are all tough games during the course of the year. But what I like about Oklahoma is defensively, Brett Venables, what he's done there. This is his 3rd year. I probably expected better last year, but they did show a lot of improvement. The first year he came in, they actually allowed 461 yards per game, improved that to 390 last year. I think they cut it down to like 315 this year. This is a legitimate D that I rate number 6 in the country. To me, the key is going to be quarterback play. Jackson Arnold did have 2 costly interceptions in the bowl game, but I think he has the potential to be a solid QB. The second big question mark I have is the offensive line, but Bill Bedenbaugh is still the offensive line coach. He always develops a good offensive line, and when I talked to Coach Venables, he said they brought in experienced veterans, and he actually feels great about the offensive line. He feels they're ambitious, intelligent, driven, tough, and he likes what they have on the offensive line, and if the offensive line and quarterback come along, maybe they win more of those big games than you would expect them to this year.
How crucial for OU is it that 2-game stretch at the end of September where Tennessee comes in on September 21st for the first ever SEC game for OU? It's in Norman, and then go to Auburn the next week. How vital is that for Oklahoma to set the tone for their SEC arrival with those 2 games?
I think huge, and I do have them favored in both games. The toughest games, I think, are at the end of the schedule, and if you slip up there, let's say they're 3-2 after those first 5 games, then look out. It's going to be a troublesome season. I don't think that'll happen. I do think they get past Tennessee at home, and I think they can survive the big trip to Jordan-Hare. I mean, Auburn is a lot tougher team at home than they are on the road. That Jordan-Hare is one of the tougher stadiums to go into, but I think the Sooners have the talent to survive those early tests.
Touch on some national things here. Are you buying the Texas hype? I mean, they lost a lot. They obviously they recruit well every year, but are they the national contender for a championship this year that they were last year?
Yes, I've got them number 4 in the country, and
I don't like you anymore,
Oklahoma,
Phil. That's it.
What?
I don't like you anymore. Sorry.
You know what? In the SEC schedule strength, I've got Missouri at number 16. Guess who's number 15?
Texas.
Yeah. Yes, they have and now they only have 3 SEC road games because the Oklahoma game being played in Dallas. And next year when we talk, Scott, guess what? Oklahoma will only have 3 SEC road games, and Texas will only have 3 SEC home games. But this year, the schedule's laid out. Look at their road games. They're against Arkansas. They're against Texas A&M and Vanderbilt. Clearly, all 3 road games are winnable. Take care of business at home. This is a team that, the Georgia game at home is a winnable one. It does come the week after Oklahoma, but let's say they go 11-1. I do have them playing in the SEC title game. I think they're strong at the line of scrimmage. Best quarterback room in the country with yours, Manning and Owens there, and it's a very talented team. Unfortunately for you, Scott.
Oh, thanks, Phil. New look SEC, new look Big Ten. How big is the gap between those 2 leagues now with OU Texas joining one and the likes of Oregon and Washington and USC joining the other?
I think the bigger question is how big's the gap after those two to the number 3 and the number 4 conferences, because they are the two clear power conferences in college football. And, when you look at what the Big Ten is adding, the 4 teams, they basically took the top 4 teams from the Pac-12 or for the top 5 teams. I think Oregon steps in and contends for a Big Ten title in their first year. I think USC is actually going to have a better record than they had last year, despite losing Caleb Williams, because the defense is much improved. And teams like UCLA and Washington, I think they struggle in their move to the Big Ten because it is a very tough conference, and they've got tough schedules this year. But the 4 teams coming in add a lot of talent to an already talented league. And one thing I got a bone to pick here, Scott, is picking an 18-team conference, for crying out loud. I used to like it when they had divisions. You could at least make sense of some things, but trying to pick them 1 through 18 when you only have 9 different outcomes possible, 9-0, 8-1 down the line, it makes it pretty difficult in the magazine business.
I would imagine, especially in those middle levels. I think on the SEC, didn't you have 3 of them maybe that were about the 5th best team in the league, with like Mizzou, OU, Tennessee, all kind of in the mix there?
Yeah. And what's going to happen this year, Scott, you're going to have 4-way ties for 3rd place and 4-way ties for 4th place, because there's just so many teams and only 9 possible outcomes.
Does Bama fall off much without Nick Saban?
That was my original reaction. Nick Saban left. They lost a lot of guys to the portal because of it. It was a late move. I'm like, oh, my goodness, Alabama's in trouble. But going over the team with Coach DeBoer, and, he actually steps into a decent situation here. He took his Washington team to the national title game last year, and I think this year's Alabama team has more overall talent than did his Washington team last year. I think they're better defensively, better in numerous areas, and they've got a veteran quarterback in Jalen Milroe. They have my number 1 special teams in the country. They bring in the Lou Groza Award winner and Graham Nicholson. He did bring in some key recruits after the players left to the portal, like Damani Jackson at the defensive back, Keon Saab coming in from Michigan at defensive back, Bernard coming in from Washington on at the receiver, Parker Brailsford coming in the offensive line, the Groza Award winner and Graham Nicholson. And I think when you look at Alabama this year, they're a legitimate contender in the SEC. Keep in mind, Kalen DeBoer in his entire head coaching career, 104-12. This guy knows how to coach, and I think he's got a more talented team than he had last year. And last year he took his team to the national title game.
It just figures with a new look college football landscape that it's a new look Big 12 as well. And your sleeper team, I love that section in your magazine each year, the teams you think are under the radar, and at the end we'll be talking about. Your number 1 is Utah. Of course, they joined the Big 12 this year. You've got them picked to win the league. It looks like by year 1 through 16 there that they're really the only one coming in that's going to make a big difference in that inaugural year. Can they win the league this first year?
I think they do win the league this first year. They are my number 1 surprise team in the country. And let's look at Utah last year. And remember, this was a team that was coming off back-to-back Pac-12 titles, back-to-back Rose Bowl games, and last year they struggled to 8-5. Why? Well, first of all, the schedule. They played a lot of the toughest teams on the road last year. They had to play Oregon State, almost unbeatable at home, USC on the road, Washington, which played in the national title game, Arizona, which finished in the top 10, all on the road. That's going to affect your win-loss record. The second thing was, in August, they didn't get a lot of attention. Brandon Rose, the backup quarterback, out for the year. Big deal. But then Cam Rising didn't play. Now, without your top 2 quarterbacks, you're throwing guys like the pig farmer in there, who, bless his heart, did his best, but 12-11 ratio, not going to cut it. Under 60% completions, not going to cut it. Teams could stack the box on them, and they struggled. Well, they've got Rising back this year. They've got Rose back this year. They bring in Sam Hurd coming in from Cal Poly, who was he was one of the top quarterbacks coming out of high school, originally signed with Washington and was at Cal Poly last year. You look at the offensive line, defensive line, they're solid. This is a team that I could see going 11-1, 12-0 this year. I think Utah's going to have a really big year. Keep Cam Rising healthy, and the majority of the tough games are at home. The toughest road game is at Oklahoma State, but the other road games are Arizona State, Houston, Colorado, UCF, all in the winnable category. Keep your eyes on the Utes this year.
Yeah, you've got Utah, then K-State, Oklahoma State, and Iowa State in the Big 12. And looking down there at number 13 out of 16 teams, Colorado. And, of course, all the hype with Coach Prime joining that program here recently. Are you buying into it or not buying into it? Do they take another step forward this year?
I think it's about the same as last year, and I'm going to be honest with you, Scott. When people ask me about Colorado last year, I think the over/under win total was 3.5. I'm like, I think I go with the under, and then after 3 games, they're 3-0 and number 19 in the country, and I'm like, damn, I missed out on that. But guess what? They finished 4-8 at the end of the year. They've got Sanders back at QB, who I think is one of the better quarterbacks in the country, Shadur Sanders. But they just have completely rechanged their roster again. I mean, a completely brand new offensive line. They've got talent in the skill positions. There's question marks on defense and a lot of changes as well. And I just think it's tough to completely change your roster in back-to-back years like they have to really go with a team that has a more stable roster. So I'm looking for more of the same type of season as last year.
Wrapping it up, you mentioned earlier, but you do have a power poll and a preseason poll, and there is a difference. You mentioned it that the power poll is the strength of these teams unit by unit on their teams compared to others, where the preseason factors in what the schedule and what role it might play. You're pretty set on your top 5 there: Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, and Penn State. Are Georgia and Ohio State head and shoulders above the other 3, or are those 5 pretty equal?
I think the other 3 are all very capable. In fact, numerous sets of my power ratings have my number 5 team, Penn State, running the table this year. They get Ohio State at home. Other than that, they avoid a lot of the big boys in the Big Ten this year, which has been their problem. They avoid Michigan. They avoid Oregon. They avoid Iowa this year. I think they've got a chance to get there. I look for improved play from Drew Alara. Oregon is a team that gets Ohio State at home in Autzen Stadium. They got a shot at knocking off the Buckeyes. I think it's going to be tough for any team to run the table undefeated this year. Scott, you take a look at Ohio State. They've got to play Oregon and Penn State on the road. Look at Georgia, for crying out loud. They play Alabama, Texas, and Ole Miss all on the road this year. That's a brutal schedule. Those are 3 top 10 teams, and oh, by the way, they open with Clemson. So I think we're going to see a little more parity, not the undefeated teams that we've seen the last couple of years, perhaps. But, I think any of the top 5 can win it.
Got a buddy, it's a big Tennessee fan. He sent me a picture before I did this. He has the collection of the last probably 8 Phil Steele yearbooks and doesn't throw them away, keeps those things. Those are your good customers, aren't they, the ones that keep that?
Yeah, absolutely. We got guys that have had all 30 years, and
oh wow!
And I think you'll find a lot of people out there once they get their hands on a copy. It's like getting 134 media guides rolled into one. Scott,
absolutely,
pretty much got everything you want to know about the team, and it's good reference. Even keep your one from 6 years ago because the box scores are gone. You got the last 10 years records in front of you. So and you know what? I take a lot of pride in those pictures. When somebody shows those pictures like that, makes me very happy.
Can you buy the back years? I mean, do you have them still in stock?
Yeah, we actually go back all the way to the first year. And
wow.
What we're gonna do in the warehouse this summer, I'm going to go through and get them all completely organized, get a number count on them, and have we've got this many left, we got this many left. Because some of the years we're down to like 25 magazines left. But yes, we still have back copies, and we'll be hitting that harder in August once we get caught up a little bit here.
Well, he is Phil Steele of the College Football Preview Magazine, 30th edition out right now, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. You can order them at philsteele.com. We'll be talking to you after the 50th edition, hopefully.
Yeah, I hope so, Scott. I'm looking forward to that. And you were, like I said, you were there early on in the magazine process, and hopefully another 20 years from now.
Absolutely. Phil, always appreciate your time. We'll do it again next summer, okay?
All right, a lot of fun talking football with you, Scott. And next summer we'll be talking about Missouri State in the FBS magazine.
They'll have their own page next year. That's something to look forward to.
2 pages.
2 pages. There you go. Phil, thank you. You bet.
All right, have a good one, Scott. Always good talking to you, my friend.
You too. That's going to do it for another edition of Around the Ozarks Sports Scene. I am Scott Puryear. As always, appreciate you listening, and big thanks to Fast Break Sports, our sponsor. If you're looking for sports cards, memorabilia, only one place to go in Springfield, Fast Break Sports. They're over on South Camel, just past the Battlefield intersection, just down the street a little bit there from Burger King. Go see the guys at Fast Break Sports. Get your man cave ready for football season because it's just around the corner. Special thanks to Phil Steele for taking time to visit with us today. We'll see you next week here on Around the Ozarks Sports Scene.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.